Hey nerds, welcome to a very special edition of the Geek Fruit Nerditorium. This week I have with me Sid Shetty. Hi, how are you?
Hey Jishnu, how's it going?
I'm well. This is fun. This is you're our first guest on the Nerditorium. We've been doing this for a while now. It's about high time we did this. We're now listening to other people's voices. How about that? That's a change.
I'll try not to disappoint.
No, I'm bored of the other two. I want new friends now. So,
Awesome, yeah.
this week we are talking about Dark. It's a show that I've been meaning to talk about for a while. It's been out for a couple of years now. It's 3 seasons of timey-wimey goodness. Let's just hit the ground running. Let's go straight to it.
Okay.
Hit me. I hear you're not the biggest fan?
No, I think it's a great show, but of
Okay.
great shows, I think it's the worst one. That would be my
Okay.
take on it.
That's an interesting qualifier. I'll take it. How about we try this? Let's go down the line. I have a
Sure.
feeling that your trajectory is kind of similar to mine. Let's start with just the first season.
So season 1 is a lot of they lay the ground for a lot that comes later. So season 1 establishes time travel, right?
Yeah.
Now that you have time travel, we're going to be discussing spoilers, so...
Well, yeah,
spoiler
no holds
alert.
barred.
Yeah.
No holds barred. Go for it.
Yeah, so at the end of season 1, you've got Jonas has met his older self, the stranger, and they've spoken about time travel, and so he's aware that all of this happens. A bunch of other characters have also sort of caught on to the whole time travel, that there may be time travel involved. Everybody sort of suspects it. But through all of that and through all the characters from the future that we see, not one person mentions the apocalypse, which is kind of strange because it's the world-ending event. And
Sure.
nobody brought that up in the first season when all this is going down. But the second season, instantly, boom, you're into the apocalypse, and that's the big plan. And that sort of threw me off because I was waiting for the storylines that had been exposed that so far to be like sort of for that to progress and for that to conclude. And then the apocalypse is suddenly the big episode now, the big bad now, and everybody's trying to prevent that. And then the same thing happens with season 3, right? You move to season 3, and then it's different worlds. And so every time it just felt like it felt like retconning, except then you get to the end, you realize that all of this had to be planned, right?
Well, yeah. I'm sure they had a plan. You can definitely tell that this show. They've even said it. I think in pretty much every interview that I've looked up with the cast and with the showrunners, talking about the fact that since the show is based in time travel and since you are therefore allowed to insert any amount of randomness into it, because it was such a finite timeline that they were working in, even though it was ever expanding with regard to going back, we're going to the front, we're going back again, we're going further in front. It was a very insular show with the number of characters in it, so they said very proudly in every interview that they knew exactly what they were doing from the get-go. They had an end game in mind, unlike other shows which are really good with this mystery box kind of a deal, which tend to go a little too long and then they end up losing their way. And I think Thrones and Lost are really good examples of how they can go wrong. I, however, think that this show does have a lot of merits to it, and a lot of credit I think has to be given to the fact that they did keep it under control for the most part with regard to not going too crazy. But I do think the one place that it really let me down by the end, particularly in season 3, especially the latter half, was the fact that they tried to tie it in purely with Jonas and Martha's sort of emotional arc. Which, what do you think about this? My strongest sentiment with it is that when you do timey-wimey stuff, it's one hell of a roller coaster ride in any show and in any film that does that kind of stuff. But they tried to end it with the pathos of it was all about them, right? Because when they figured out what was happening at the end, they realized, oh, we're just going to retcon so many people that we love and they'll never exist and it's all because of us. That didn't feel earned to me because it kind of didn't matter until the last 3 episodes. The entire show through, I think the whole fun of the show was just trying to keep up with the show and trying to keep your head around who's who and who you're looking at when an old man walks in and you're trying to guess, okay, now who's he related to and how are they related? That felt like the entire crux of the show. And then when the show ends, it tries to tell you, but really it was about these two all along. Well, I felt like I didn't care that much about those two by the end of it.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that. Like, I think Jonas is probably the dumbest protagonist I've ever come across. Insofar as that he's always surprised by the fact that everybody's lying to him, and he just falls for it every time. Every character in that show has lied to Jonas, and he has fallen hook, line, and sinker each time. I feel like he never learned, and there was never any growth. It was just this same wide-eyed child in every shot, from start to end. And yeah,
And he never showered.
Yeah, and he never showered. He never showered, and like and he was incredibly persuasive for somebody who had like rope marks around his neck, and for him to convince Marta, who's never seen him before, has a boyfriend already, to that we're destined to be together. That's sort of, I mean, sure. Good luck.
How many times does that line work for you? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. Exactly, and he was such a dumb protagonist, and Martha as well. Like Martha, to a certain extent, I mean, we see so much less of her because she's really only a really functional character in the third season.
Yeah.
When we discover Ava and her parallel universe.
So speaking of Ava and the parallel universe, I want to touch on two things. One is, you say Jonas might be the dumbest protagonist you've seen. I want to know what pulled you into the first season enough to make you stick through a second and inevitably a third, even though it sounds like you basically hate watched the last season. What pulled you in, and then what kept you in?
Man, it was just they had so many characters that they introduced, and a lot of them were interesting. Like, I mean, even Jonas, aside from the fact that he was the dumbest protagonist of all time, maybe, there were just so many characters and so many open ends that I wanted to know how that ended, right? I wanted to know whether the show actually had a plan, whether they tied it up, and they did in a lot of ways. I think they shot a lot of loops by the end of it, and so it was totally worth the watch through all three seasons. The reason I actually hate watched it was, one, because I mean, all of this could have been undone if one person stopped, like Claudia did to an extent, and just explained everything to their younger selves. Like, just took a second and like, hey, I know this is weird, but like, I'm you from the future. Here's what's gonna happen. Here's how it's gonna play out. Here's what you need to do. Right? The whole show falls apart if one character does that. Even if Jonas does it at any point, right?
True.
That, and then so that's what got me through. So season one was just the fact that I was so intrigued by all these characters. I want to know where it went. I like season two because like it sort of built, and like you see the transition gradually towards the story not just being about, or not being entirely about, all the other characters, but Jonas, Marta, and Claudia being the main three factions in all of this, and those three factions coming to the forefront by the end of it. And season three was just for answers. I just needed answers. I needed closure. I was tired of the constant curveballs with the once the apocalypse. Now there's different worlds. I was like, this show has to end. I'm so glad it ends at season three, because like I don't think I would have sat through a fourth one of just, there's now something else. Now there's unicorns and there's magic.
Likewise.
Somewhere. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you. I thought that the greatest thing it did, I'm sure you must have heard about this. I think everybody was talking about season one being very similar to Stranger Things. A lot of parallels were drawn to Stranger Things, and I think rightfully so. And then eventually that conversation kind of died away, also rightfully so, because as the show progressed, it went further and further away from that kind of Hardy Boys, Scooby-Doo and the gang trying to solve the murder mystery, which is what Stranger Things really holds on to. And then this show, I thought, was strongest in season one because it was like that with Stranger Things, in that it was a crime show. Like, if you remember, like the very beginning of it was about trying to figure out who killed those kids, and you're following Ulrich and Ulrich and Charlotte. There we go. Yeah. You're trying to follow the two of them who are in the police force, and then one of them ends up going back in time and sends a message from the past to Charlotte, right? So that was really cool. And then eventually it just keeps going deeper and deeper, and then we lost the murder mystery angle of it, right? And then by season two, it's now about Adam and Eve, and then it becomes like a biblical story, and like, okay, so is this going to be about like gods and devils, and is that why timey-wimey things happen? Because that's a pretty good reason for it, if like God wills it, so therefore this city or this little village is being plagued by time or something. And then season three is about Jonas and Martha's love, and how their love is what has somehow caused this bizarre plague upon the world. But it's basically three different shows in each season, which I don't think I'm the biggest fan of, because I bought into the first show you showed me in season one. And while season two and three are one hell of a ride. They weren't quite as intriguing for me, but the only reason I watched it was because season 1 was so good, and they were consistent as all hell with giving you a really beautifully woven narrative through time travel, which is incredibly hard to do. And I think all the props in the world for like a very, very seamlessly entangled web that they have, how all the characters linked and how everybody knows each other. It's done beautifully. But I think by the end of it, I was just kind of left feeling a little disappointed by the fact that there wasn't as much heart in it. Like, by the time we got to the very last episode, I just didn't care anymore. I was happy that the ride was over, but I kind of felt like, literally like I've just walked out of a roller coaster, where like, that was fun, but I just had a good time screaming into the wind, but I didn't really get much out of it. Like, I'm not going to be thinking about any of these characters significantly, in years to come. I'll be telling people, hey, if you want to see a really cool narrative and a really fun, timey-wimey thing, Dark is a great show. But I'm not going to be telling you, like, hey, you want to see a really beautifully written character? Look up Claudia Tiedemann or Egon Tiedemann or whatever. Like, they're nice, but by the end, I guess they were kind of letting me down.
I think the plot is really the best part of the show. The fact that they've written this very tight script about the timeline and how everything functions. I think they did that flawlessly. But just the characters are just dumb pawns in all of that. Like I felt nothing for any of the characters through the entire show.
Okay, so now I just want to end this out with, have you seen the website that was made by Netflix for the show, dark.netflix.io?
I browsed it, yeah.
If you have gone to the website, I think I did it wrong because I spent way too much time on that website while I was in the middle of watching the show, because I saw all of season 1 in like maybe 2 days. I took a couple of weeks off, started on season 2, and then I stopped and took like a month or 2 months off. And then when I knew I was going to get back into the show, I needed a refresher because it was just way too convoluted in my head. I spent an hour on that website, genuinely studying it, because it was also just beautiful to look at. Like, that website is just designed immaculately. I just loved the UI of that. So I was just staring at that thing and studying the family tree, and I shot myself in the foot, because then the entire second half of season 2, when I watched it, felt way too in control for my liking. I wasn't on the edge of my seat and scratching my head like I was with season 1, when every time we'd got to a new scene and I'd see an older or a younger version of somebody, I'd be doing the maths in my head trying to figure out who the hell this is. When I saw that website, I knew everybody. And so in season 2, I was just kind of like, okay, here's young so-and-so, and there's old so-and-so, and there's the second version of the young guy. And then it just, like, the fun of the show kind of died out for me, because I was like, well, now what do you got? Now you just have a bunch of people running around saying, was ist das? And going, okay, I guess I'll jump into your time machine now, my friend.
Yeah, man, I was lucky that way. I finished the show over the span of a week. I finished all 3 seasons over the span of a week. Like, once I started season 1, it was lockdown. I had my nights free.
No, likewise, yeah.
Yeah. So once I started like season 1, I was hooked, and I had to end it. And by the end of it, I think that's why also I was hate watching it at the end of it, because I was also so tired that like I just been watching the show for like I was doing 6-8 hours a day of just watching Dark and trying to get it done, and I just needed the answers, and I needed to end. I needed like to put it to stop so I could process it. And only once I did that did I ever go onto the site, because I thought I missed something. I thought maybe there were better answers to it. Maybe I was being too critical of it, and I wasn't.
Right.
Jonas was that dumb through all of it. There was no explanation for why he bought into everybody's theories, but it was what it was. And like I'm glad I went to it afterwards. I'm glad I didn't shoot myself in the foot that way.
So that slowed things down for me. But like I said, that's my bad. That's my fault. So in conclusion, don't look up the family tree for too long. It's a cool website if you want to see a cool website, but don't spend too much time looking up the Netflix Dark website. Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sid. This was great. It was so nice to hear somebody else's voice for a change. Speaking of whose, we'd like to hear your voices in comment form. You should write into us in the comments below, or hit us up in our DMs. We're at Geek Fruit HQ on all the social media and all of the things. Once again, thank you so much, Sid, and we we'll see you guys next time.